The night was quiet, and the forest was calm. Only the soft sound of leaves moving in the wind could be heard. A young man named Daniel sat near his small campfire, watching the flames dance. He had come out here to escape the noise of the city, to be alone with the stars. The sky was clear, filled with millions of bright dots shining above. Daniel leaned back and smiled, thinking this night would be peaceful. But then he noticed something unusual. Among the stars, one light moved strangely. It was not a plane, and it was not a shooting star. It glowed brighter and brighter, and Daniel felt his heart beat faster. Within moments, the light dropped lower, slipping behind the trees of the forest. The ground shook slightly, and he heard a distant sound, like thunder mixed with metal. Daniel stood up, nervous but curious. He picked up a flashlight and decided to check. Each step into the dark forest made him more aware of the silence around him. The animals were gone. The night birds had stopped singing. Something was different, something was wrong. The deeper he went, the stronger a strange humming sound became. It was like electricity, but alive. Finally, Daniel reached a small clearing. And there, at the center, he saw something he would never forget. A figure lay on the ground, glowing faintly under the moonlight. It was a girl. No, not fully human. Her skin shimmered with a pale silver-blue glow. Her hair looked almost like liquid light, falling around her face. Her eyes, half open, revealed a strange color, like stars trapped in glass. Daniel froze, unable to move. Was she dangerous? Was this a dream? But then he noticed the pain in her movements. She was hurt, her arm bleeding with a strange golden liquid. Slowly, she tried to sit up, but collapsed back to the ground. Her breathing was weak, almost broken. Daniel's fear mixed with something else, compassion. She did not look like a monster. She looked lost. "Are you okay?" Daniel whispered, even though he knew she might not understand. The girl turned her eyes toward him. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Daniel felt something impossible. It was as if her thoughts touched his mind. A voice without words, a feeling of fear, loneliness, and hope. He knelt down carefully, keeping a safe distance. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, his voice shaking. The alien girl blinked slowly, as if trying to trust him. She raised her hand slightly, pointing at her wound. Daniel hesitated, then pulled a small first aid kit from his backpack. His hands trembled, but he cleaned her wound gently. She winced, but did not push him away. Instead, she held onto his wrist with surprising strength. Her skin was cold, yet strangely warm at the same time. Their eyes met again, and Daniel felt the world around him disappear. The fireflies floated above the clearing, and the night grew darker. The alien girl whispered something in a language Daniel could not understand. Her voice was soft, musical, but filled with urgency. She pointed to the sky, then to the forest, then back at herself. Daniel could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She was running from something, and it was not over yet. In the distance, Daniel heard a low rumble. Not thunder, not wind, but something mechanical. The alien girl's eyes widened in fear. She grabbed Daniel's hand tightly, pulling him closer. Her message was clear, danger was near. Daniel looked back toward the trees. The shadows moved, and strange lights flickered in the darkness. He realized he had only two choices: run away now and save himself, or stay and protect the mysterious girl. His chest tightened, his heart raced. One night that was supposed to be quiet and peaceful had turned into something else. Something bigger, something dangerous. Daniel took a deep breath. He had no idea who she was, or why she was here. But he knew one thing. Leaving her alone was not an option. The story of his life was about to change forever, and this was only the beginning. Daniel's heart pounded as the strange humming in the distance grew louder. The alien girl still gripped his hand tightly, her glowing fingers trembling. Her silver-blue skin reflected the faint moonlight, and her eyes kept darting to the shadows beyond the trees. Whatever was coming, she feared it, and that fear alone was enough for Daniel to make his choice. He pulled her gently toward his small campsite. "Come with me," he whispered, even though he knew she might not understand his words. But she understood his tone, the urgency in his voice. Together, they stumbled through the forest, his flashlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The girl leaned against him, weak and hurt, but determined to move forward. Each time she staggered, Daniel tightened his grip, refusing to let her fall. At last, they reached the fire, its warmth flickering against the cold night. Daniel lowered her onto his blanket and quickly added wood to the flames. She shivered, curling close to the heat like a child seeking comfort. Daniel noticed her eyes following every movement he made, curious yet cautious. He sat across from her, his chest still rising and falling with nervous breaths. "What are you?" he asked softly, almost to himself. But she only tilted her head, her long hair shimmering like liquid light in the fire's glow. The silence stretched until she lifted her hand again. Her fingers moved across the dirt, drawing symbols Daniel could not understand. Strange patterns, circles, and lines that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. When she finished, she looked at him, her eyes filled with a silent plea. Daniel stared at the marks, his mind spinning. She was trying to communicate, but the gap between them was wide. Still, he tried. Daniel picked up a stick and drew a simple picture of himself, a stick figure with short hair. Then he tapped his chest. "Daniel," he said, pointing to the drawing. The alien girl blinked, then softly echoed the sound, though her voice bent the letters in a strange, musical way. "Neil," she whispered, her voice like wind through glass. Daniel's heart leaped. She understood, at least a little. Encouraged, he pointed to her, raising his eyebrows. She hesitated, then pressed her hand to her chest. A soft hum escaped her lips, forming a name Daniel could barely pronounce. It was long, flowing, and strange, but the sound lingered beautifully in the air. Daniel smiled, though he knew he would never be able to say it correctly. Still, he tried, fumbling with the syllables. The girl laughed, not fully, but a faint, breathy sound that carried warmth. For a moment, the tension between them broke, replaced by something softer. Daniel offered her a piece of bread from his pack. She sniffed it cautiously before taking a small bite. Her eyes widened in surprise, as if she had never tasted anything like it. She nodded quickly and reached for more. Daniel chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "Guess bread works everywhere," he said, though she didn't understand. Yet she smiled, and that was enough. Hours passed slowly, but the night did not feel the same. Daniel had expected loneliness under the stars, but now he found himself watching her every move. Her fragile strength, the way her eyes glowed faintly whenever she was near the fire. He caught himself staring, wondering how a creature so strange could also feel familiar, as if fate had planned this meeting long before he even lit his campfire. But the peace did not last. Suddenly, the girl stiffened, her head snapping toward the dark forest. Her glowing marks brightened, pulsing with fear. Daniel followed her gaze and saw it too, distant red lights moving through the trees. Not fireflies, not lanterns, but something mechanical, hunting. The sound of metal grinding against earth filled the night. She whispered something urgent, her tone sharp, her hand clutching his arm. Daniel didn't need translation, they were being tracked. His chest tightened. What was he doing? Helping an alien, running from machines he didn't understand. But when he looked at her, fragile, scared, yet trusting him, the answer was clear. He could not abandon her, not now. Daniel quickly doused the fire, grabbing his bag and pulling her close. "Quiet," he whispered, pressing a finger to his lips. The girl nodded, her glowing hair dimming as if she could control the light within her. They slipped into the shadows together, moving away from the clearing. Daniel's breath came in sharp bursts, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind them, the red lights drew closer, scanning the ground with beams of energy. The night that began with stars had turned into a deadly chase. And Daniel realized that his one decision, to help a girl who fell from the sky, had changed everything. This was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about connection. And in the middle of the silent forest, under the cold gaze of the stars, a bond was forming, one that neither human nor alien could break. But the hunters were near, and the night was far from. The forest grew darker as Daniel guided the alien girl through the twisting paths. Every step felt heavy, every sound around them seemed louder than it should. The red lights behind them moved like predators, searching the ground with cold precision. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand, urging her to move faster, though she stumbled often, weakened by her wound. Branches snapped under their boots, and the hum of machines grew nearer. Daniel pulled her down suddenly, hiding behind a fallen tree. Through the cracks in the wood, he saw them, strange floating drones with red eyes glowing like fire. Their metallic arms reached through the bushes, scanning the soil with beams of light. The alien girl pressed herself close to Daniel, trembling. He could feel her heartbeat racing against his side, her breath sharp and shallow. He placed a finger over his lips again, and she nodded, forcing herself to stay quiet. One of the drones paused, its red eye turning in their direction. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The beam of light swept dangerously close, almost touching his leg. But then, after a tense silence, it drifted away, following the others. Daniel exhaled slowly, his heart still thundering in his chest. The girl looked at him with wide, shining eyes, and for a moment, their fear connected them even more than words ever could. When the drones moved further away, Daniel whispered, "We can't stay here." He helped her to her feet, and they moved deeper into the woods, following a small trail that Daniel remembered led to an old cave. The forest grew colder, and the strange lights of the hunters flickered behind them like ghostly shadows. Daniel's body ached from carrying her weight, but he refused to slow down. Something inside him had shifted. This wasn't just about protecting a stranger anymore. He needed to keep her safe, though he couldn't explain why. At last, they reached the mouth of the cave, hidden by thick vines and moss. Daniel pushed the plants aside and guided her in. The cave was damp, but the darkness offered safety. He set her down on a smooth rock and lit a small flashlight, shielding the beam with his hand. Her glowing marks shimmered faintly in the shadows, like starlight trapped under her skin. Daniel crouched beside her, whispering, "We'll wait here until they pass." She didn't understand his words, but the calm in his voice seemed to ease her fear. As silence returned, Daniel studied her closely. Her wound still leaked golden liquid, and her skin looked paler than before. He knew she wouldn't survive the night if he didn't do more. But what could he do? He was just an ordinary man, alone in the forest. Yet when she lifted her hand and placed it over his chest, Daniel felt something strange. It was like a pulse of warmth moving from her into him, a bond forming deeper than language. Her eyes locked on his, filled with silent trust, as if she was telling him without words, "I need you." The moment was broken by a sharp noise outside. The drones were back, their red beams cutting across the cave entrance. Daniel quickly switched off the light, pressing the girl against the cold stone wall. They stood motionless as the mechanical hum echoed through the air. The red glow seeped through the vines, searching, hungry. Daniel held his breath, his hand instinctively wrapping around hers. She squeezed his fingers, her trembling slowing as if his touch gave her strength. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the machines moved on. The forest grew silent again, the danger slipping away into the night. Daniel slumped against the wall, his body weak with relief. Beside him, the alien girl rested her head against his shoulder, exhausted but safe. For the first time, Daniel realized how close they were, how fragile and real this moment was. It was not just fear keeping them together now. It was something else, something unspoken. The cave echoed with the sound of dripping water. Outside, the world remained dangerous, filled with machines hunting for her. But inside, for a brief moment, there was peace. Daniel looked at her sleeping face, her strange glow illuminating the dark stone. He knew nothing about her, her world, her people, why she was here. Yet he felt a certainty deep inside. This night was no accident. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and the story was only beginning. But as he closed his eyes for a short rest, a chilling thought filled his mind. The hunters would not give up, and when they found her, they would find him too. The chase was far from over, and tomorrow might be even more dangerous than tonight. The cave was cold, but the silence felt like safety. Daniel sat near the entrance, keeping watch while the alien girl rested deeper inside. The red glow of the drones had vanished into the night, but his nerves refused to calm. He could still hear the faint hum in his mind, like a warning that danger was never far away. The girl stirred, her glowing marks flickering weakly. Her body trembled as though fighting something invisible. Daniel hurried to her side, kneeling beside the stone where she lay. "Hey, stay with me," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, the cave seemed to shine with the starlight in her gaze. She lifted her hand, placing it against his chest once more. But this time, the touch was stronger, deliberate. Daniel gasped as his vision blurred, his surroundings dissolving into light. In an instant, he was no longer in the cave. He was standing in a vast, endless sky. Floating cities hovered above glowing oceans, and alien towers stretched higher than mountains. Colors he had never seen before filled the horizon, strange yet breathtaking. He realized this wasn't real. It was her world, her memories. The vision shifted, and Daniel felt her emotions pour into him. Loneliness like an endless storm, exile from her people, hunted by those who once called her family, betrayed for reasons he could not understand. She was not just lost, she was running from a future she did not choose. And in the middle of that sorrow, Daniel saw himself reflected in her thoughts. His kindness, his choice to help instead of fear, had become her only hope. The vision broke suddenly, and Daniel collapsed back to the cave floor, his chest heaving, his hands trembling. He looked at her, truly looked, and realized she had trusted him with her soul, her world, her pain, her truth, all shared without a single word. She was more than an alien girl, more than a strange visitor. She was someone desperate for connection, someone who had chosen him. "Why me?" Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. She blinked slowly, then placed her hand on his face. Her touch was gentle, but her eyes carried weight, as if promising something eternal. She spoke softly in her language, a string of sounds he couldn't understand. Yet the meaning pressed into his heart. "I will not forget you." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest tight. In that moment, he felt the danger outside melt away. The drones, the hunters, the fear, none of it mattered as much as the bond forming here. He touched her hand, whispering, "I won't leave you." Even if she couldn't understand, he hoped she could feel the truth in his voice. Suddenly, the cave shook with a low rumble. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the girl sat up sharply, her glowing marks flashing bright. Daniel's heart jumped. The hunters were back, or maybe something worse. The girl looked at him with urgency, her glowing eyes wide. She pointed toward the entrance, then back at him, then shook her head violently. Her message was clear. If they found her, he would die. "No," Daniel whispered firmly, shaking his head. He wasn't going to leave her, not after everything he had just seen. The girl's hands trembled as she touched his chest again. This time, her glow wrapped around her arm like living fire. Daniel realized she was trying to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing herself. But Daniel grabbed her shoulders, pulling her close. "Listen," he said, voice sharp with determination. "You're not alone anymore, not while I'm here." She didn't understand the words, but the fire in his eyes made her still. For a long moment, the cave was filled with nothing but the sound of their breaths. And then she lowered her head, accepting his choice. The rumble grew louder, and shadows flickered outside the entrance. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand, his heart racing. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. He had made his promise, and he would keep it. One night had already changed his life, but now he understood. It was not just a night anymore, it was destiny. The cave trembled again, this time stronger. Daniel pulled the alien girl closer, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Shadows flickered, followed by a blinding light that cut through the vines like a blade. The hunters had found them, and there was no time left to hide. The girl's glowing marks burned brighter, her body tense with fear and resolve. She whispered something quickly in her language, her voice sharp and urgent. Daniel shook his head, not understanding but refusing to let her go. Outside, the hum of machines grew louder, joined by something heavier, the roar of an engine. It was not just drones this time, but a ship descending into the forest. Branches snapped, the ground shook, and Daniel covered his face from the rushing wind. When he looked up, a sleek silver craft stood in the clearing, its surface shining with alien light. Figures stepped out, tall and armored, their movements sharp and disciplined. Their helmets glowed faintly, and their weapons buzzed with energy. They were not searching anymore. They had come for her. The alien girl's eyes filled with sorrow. She touched Daniel's cheek one last time, her hand trembling. He could feel the weight of her emotions pressing into him. Gratitude, sadness, and something deeper. "No," he whispered, clutching her hand tighter. "You can't leave like this." But she shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening. Her glowing marks pulsed with soft light, as if she was saying goodbye. Daniel's chest tightened, his voice breaking. "You don't understand. I can't just let you go." The soldiers stepped into the cave, their weapons raised. Daniel stood protectively in front of her, though he knew he was powerless. One soldier barked a command in their language, his voice cold and mechanical. The girl responded softly, her tone filled with defiance. Daniel didn't know what she said, but the soldiers hesitated, lowering their weapons slightly. She stepped forward, pushing past Daniel, her glow dimming as if surrendering. "No," Daniel shouted, grabbing her arm. But she pressed her forehead lightly against his chest, her touch sending a wave of warmth through him. Her voice whispered against his ear, soft and filled with finality. Though he could not understand the words, he knew their meaning. "Live, for me." The soldiers pulled her away, their grip firm and unyielding. Daniel struggled against them, but one strike from a weapon sent him crashing to the ground. His vision blurred, his ears ringing. Through the haze, he saw her looking back, her eyes locked on his until the last moment. Her hand reached toward him, trembling. Then the soldiers forced her onto the ship, the doors closing with a hiss. Daniel crawled weakly to the cave entrance, his body aching. Outside, the ship's engines roared, glowing brighter and brighter. He screamed her name, or the closest sound he could make, into the night. But his voice was swallowed by the thunder of the craft lifting into the sky. Within seconds, it vanished into the stars, leaving only silence behind. The forest returned to stillness, but Daniel's world had shattered. He fell to his knees, his chest heavy with emptiness. The fire, the connection, the promise, all torn away in a single moment. Tears blurred his vision, though he didn't notice them falling. One night had felt like forever, but now it was gone. As dawn broke, Daniel sat alone at the cave's edge, watching the pale light of morning creep over the trees. The world looked the same, but he was not. The stars that once brought him peace now felt like a wound. Somewhere out there, she was alive, but out of reach, and the echo of her voice lingered in his heart. A whisper he could not forget, "I will not forget you." Daniel clenched his fists, his grief hardening into resolve. She was gone, taken back to her world, but their story was not over. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when, but he swore to himself that this was not the end. One night had begun it, but a lifetime was still waiting. Years passed, but the memory of that night never left Daniel. He tried to live an ordinary life again, but nothing felt the same. The stars no longer brought peace, they only reminded him of her. The glow in her eyes, the warmth of her touch, the promise he made. Each night, he wondered if she remembered him too, or if he had simply been a forgotten shadow in her story. But fate had other plans. One quiet evening, the skies above Earth lit up with fire. People poured into the streets, pointing at the massive ships descending from the stars. They were not like the hunter's crafts he had seen years ago. These ships were larger, stronger, and carried the power of armies. Panic spread, the world preparing for invasion. Daniel stood frozen, his heart torn between fear and hope. Could it be her? The city trembled as the ships landed in the fields outside. Soldiers marched out in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the pale moonlight. At their center, a figure stepped forward, tall and radiant. Her marks glowed brighter than Daniel remembered, her hair flowing like silver fire. She was no longer the frightened girl he had once protected. She was a leader now. And yet, when her eyes swept across the crowd, they stopped on him. Time froze, and Daniel felt his chest tighten. She had come back, and she had not forgotten. Gasps rippled through the humans gathered as the alien soldiers raised their weapons. But the girl lifted her hand, commanding silence. Her voice echoed across the field, strong and unshakable. The words were alien, but the power in them was clear. She was not here to destroy. And then, to everyone's shock, she stepped down from the line of soldiers and walked straight to Daniel. The world seemed to hold its breath. Daniel could barely move. His mind screamed that this was impossible, unreal. But when she stopped before him, her glowing hand reaching out, he knew the truth. It was her, the girl from the cave, the girl who had been torn from him. She whispered his name, her voice still bending the letters but filled with warmth. "Daniel." The crowd murmured in confusion, but her soldiers did not move. She turned, her eyes blazing with defiance as she spoke in her language. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning in her tone. She was claiming him, before her people, before his people, before the stars. This human is mine, her voice declared to the universe. Daniel's heart pounded. Part of him wanted to run, to hide, to escape the storm that was about to fall. But another part, the part that had waited years for this moment, stepped forward. He met her glowing eyes, feeling the same bond that once burned in the cave. It had not faded with time or distance. If anything, it had grown stronger. The silence broke when more ships roared through the sky. Another alien faction, enemies of her people, descending like predators. The ground shook, explosions lit the horizon. The girl turned sharply, her voice barking commands to her soldiers. Then she grabbed Daniel's hand, pulling him close just as she had on that first night. Her touch carried the same message it always had: don't let go. Together, they ran toward the safety of her ship as chaos erupted around them. Daniel's mind spun. The quiet life he had built was gone. The world was no longer just Earth, no longer just his. It was part of something far bigger, far more dangerous. But as long as she was by his side, he felt ready. The bond between them had survived years, galaxies, and war. Now it was stronger than ever. The ship lifted, carrying them above the burning horizon. Daniel stood beside her, the weight of her soldiers' stares heavy on him. But she did not let go of his hand. For her people, he was an outsider. But for her, he was everything. And in that moment, Daniel understood. That one night had not been an accident. It was the beginning of a destiny neither of them could escape. The war between the alien factions raged across the skies of Earth. Explosions lit the horizon, and the ground shook as ships battled above the cities. Daniel stood at the window of the alien craft, his hands clenched. He had never imagined his quiet life would turn into this. But beside him stood the girl he once found wounded in a forest, no longer a frightened stranger, but a warrior, a leader, and something more. Her soldiers moved with discipline, obeying her every command. Yet their eyes kept flicking toward Daniel, puzzled, questioning. Why would their commander hold the hand of a human? But she did not let go. Instead, she pulled him forward, placing him beside her at the center of the command deck. Her message to her people was clear. He was not a weakness. He was part of her strength. The battle turned fierce, enemy ships pushing closer. The alien girl barked orders, her voice steady, but her grip on Daniel's hand remained. He knew he could not fight as her soldiers did. Yet he realized he had something else to give: courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand by her no matter the cost. When fear threatened to creep into her eyes, Daniel's steady gaze reminded her she was not alone. Together, they steadied each other. Hours passed like storms, but finally, the enemy forces retreated into the black void of space. The skies cleared, leaving Earth scarred but standing. Cheers erupted among her people, but her gaze never left Daniel. For her, the victory was not just survival, it was reunion. She touched her forehead gently against his, their breaths mingling. And though no words were exchanged, Daniel understood. This was no fleeting bond, it was a lifetime. Days turned into weeks, and Earth changed. What began as fear of invasion became something else. Humans saw aliens not as conquerors, but as allies, because of her choice. And Daniel became the bridge between two worlds. At first, he felt like an outsider among her people. But the way she looked at him, the way she defended him, erased any doubt. Her soldiers, once skeptical, began to bow their heads in respect when he passed. Not because he was strong, but because their leader loved him. Seasons turned, and the bond between them grew deeper. It was not always easy. Their worlds were different, their customs strange. But love does not need the same language. It lives in gestures, in trust, in the simple act of never letting go. Daniel taught her laughter with simple human jokes. She showed him the beauty of her stars, painting the night sky with lights that only her kind could summon. Together, they built a life no one could have imagined. Years later, children played under the twin banners of human and alien, their laughter echoing in the fields where once machines of war had stood. Daniel watched as small hands, some glowing with alien light and some not, held each other without fear. The future he once thought impossible was now real. A future born from one night in a forest, one choice to show kindness. And on quiet evenings, when the stars shone bright, Daniel would sit with her at his side. her head resting against his shoulder, her glowing marks pulsing softly like a heartbeat. He often thought back to that first night, the fire, the fear, the bond that began with a single touch. It had turned into more than survival, more than destiny. It had turned into love, a love strong enough to unite two worlds. As the years stretched on, the people around them called their story legend. But to Daniel and the alien girl, it was simply life. A life they chose together, a lifetime born from a single night. And when they looked at each other, they knew the truth. It had never been chance. It had always been fate.